All right, welcome. This is Tyler from the Ojai Post, and we're starting a new little feature here on the Post where I'm going to interview members from our Ojai community. And the first person that I'm interviewing, who I'm introducing you to here, is Dustin Byerley. His company is
Hello.
Dustin Byerley Design, and we're going to talk a little bit about Ojai and a little bit about what he does. And feel free to leave a comment and share it on Facebook, and come on back for more. So, welcome, Dustin.
Hello, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we're both here in Ojai, but we're about 4 miles apart. You're downtown, I'm on the east end. And
Excellent.
why don't we start with you telling us how long you've been in Ojai and what you really love about Ojai, and maybe also tell us where you've lived. And I know you lived in the big city, and how things
Yeah,
kind of differ living out there and out here, and what's good and what's not so good. And tell us a little bit about your Ojai experience.
absolutely. I've been in Ojai for about 4 years. My family's been here for about 18. I came up here after living in Los Angeles and Santa Barbara, growing up in San Diego. So I've kind of been up and down California. Um, I had an ad agency in Los Angeles for about 6 years. And I just find living in Ojai is just real refreshing. A lot of professionals in the area doing great work. I just love that community. I love coming into town every day and seeing people you know. And I know some people don't like that, but after living in the city, it's refreshing to see a good friend and a familiar face.
So let's talk a little bit about your company. It's called Dustin Byerley Design. Somebody can check it out on Facebook if they like. Um, your primary focus is on, if I have this correctly, branding and product development. So
Yes,
maybe
yes.
you can start by telling us a little bit about the difference between what a graphic designer does and what you do.
Branding is something that I usually have to explain it to a client, and once they understand it, they really get it. They love it. They love the process. Most of the time, people see branding as kind of like a logo, a product package, some kind of visual identity. A brand is actually a number of assets together, kind of working as one. It's the totality of the experience of the company or the product. So a brand would have visual assets, which would be like a logo. It would have a brand voice, which is, what does it sound like? What does it feel like? Just a number of all the collective elements of what a business or product is. Graphic design is an aspect of the process, actually applying a look and feel. But branding is, the first half of it usually is a lot of writing and research. So that's kind of the short summary I could give at this time.
And when you are conveying a brand or sharing that with a potential audience, how much of that comes across as conscious and how much of it might influence the subconscious?
I mean, I always say it's kind of an elusive process. Branding is it's a left and right brain process. Sometimes you hit right on target, sometimes you don't. And that's actually originally what focus groups were, was not figuring out what people wanted, but how close you were on target, how close you were in focus on what the intention was. It's a process of continually putting things out there to the consumer and then getting feedback and knowing what to do with that feedback in an appropriate way. Not just, I see this all the time. People get feedback and they get gun shy, and they change the design, they go run and they do this, and then nothing's compelling, nothing's exciting. It just kind of gets dumbed down to, uh, a presentation that is safe,
Yeah,
and that's what I usually try to avoid.
yeah,
So,
decisions by committee. That happens with a lot of
absolutely, very,
uh, many aspects of marketing and operations in a company.
yeah, very dangerous.
So you did the logo for Future Wednesdays.
Hmm.
Where else have we seen your work around town?
About 6 years ago, I actually did a Save the Skate Park poster through John Rydell in the city to raise awareness of the skate park back then and the funds they needed to keep it going. And that's when I actually lived in Ventura. That was my first kind of touch in with actually doing something for Ojai specifically. Since then, I have my personal practice, which is primarily, you know, not not a lot of my clients are in Ojai. Some in Ventura. I have a client in Nevada, and possibly one in Germany soon. So, the things that pay my bills tend to be mid-sized businesses, not always in Ojai. but I'm looking to redirect that. I'm looking to work more with local business owners and product developers, and I know there's a lot of them, and I have worked with a few of them. But as far as things around town, I do a lot of donating of my services for music posters. Doing a lot of stuff for the Deer Lodge right now. Just actually rebranded the Deer Lodge, new logo out soon. Lots of work for Christopher Minister and his out of town bands that he's bringing in. Lots of bands from LA and New York, which is really cool. Obviously all the Future Wednesday stuff and some special events around town. Usually you can see my name and my phone number in the left corner if I'm proud of it, and probably not if I'm not. So, but yeah, lots of things. Also, I've done some brand development for a local health beverage, and also starting something next month for another local company.
Oh, great. Cool. And you were gracious enough to offer your time to help me out with a nonprofit project I have. And that's something that I'll be sharing with the Ojai Post community, hopefully in the next few weeks.
Excellent. That was a pleasure.
Great. So what kind of projects do you really enjoy? In other words, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
Meaningful projects. I love art. I love music. I'm a musician myself. I enjoy that aspect of it. I always thought, if I was able to do the real fun, creative stuff all the time, I would be happy. But as I've gotten older, I find myself more satisfied with transforming traditional business type products and services, getting more meaningful, working with people who love what they do and really have something meaningful. I can't get inspired selling a product or branding a product that really doesn't have any kind of innate value within it. My job is to find that innate value, and if it's not there, I'm not going to find it. So, meaningful things. I think we're kind of moving past this green movement into. I think it's evoking deeper things within ourselves. It's not just being conscious about the environment, and the earth, and the body also, obviously, health and things like that. But what about our emotional state? I think these are issues that are going to start growing, in the next decade. I think people's emotional state, their well-being, and the totality of truly holistic experience, and how we apply that into our traditional business landscape, I think is going to be very important. I think people are just getting more open and in touch with those things.
So how do we apply that notion of well-being and kind of a holistic approach to life and living and work to Ojai in terms of how do you see, does Ojai brand itself, and what works about what they're doing and what doesn't work?
Well, if I understand your question correctly, there's when you say, I'm sorry, I guess when you say what does Ojai brand itself, I guess could you explain that a little clearer?
Well, sure. Some communities you go into, for instance, very much say we're a tourist town or we're known for X or Y and Z. And
Uh-huh.
Ojai, roughly 2/3 of Ojai's city revenue is from what's called cultural tourism.
Yes, yes.
So do you get the sense that Ojai, whether it's through the city or marketing agencies or just sort of
I see.
a general kind of ecosystem approach, does Ojai brand itself? How does it position itself? And does it do it well?
Well, with my family being here for the last 18 years, I've touched in, spent some time here on and off throughout the years, and I definitely the feeling that I get as far as a brand, and brands are different for everyone because they have their own emotional application to the experience. For me personally, with my observations, I feel that it seems to be that it used to be a little more of a spiritual type town. You'd see a lot more the Crystal Store downtown and a lot of activities like that, and that's still obviously very present. Um, but it did seem to kind of lull a little bit. I almost feel like there's this kind of cultural balance between maybe kind of the haves and the have-nots as far as the representation in the town. There's amazing local artists, and fortunately we have the Made in Ojai store now to have more representation of the people who maybe have not had the ability to represent themselves. Um, but as far as a brand, I mean, it's I've always equated it with kind of Sedona-like energy, but you go to Sedona and it's just popping. I mean, it's just thriving. There's so much energy, so much art, and it seems a little mundane. It does seem a little like something's maybe boiling up from under the surface, hopefully soon. But it does seem to me that there's a lot of talent and a lot more people contributing to the community locally. So I have a feeling that the brand of Ojai is only going to get better, especially with more national attention with the movie Easy A and things like that. And uh, I think it's on the verge of something, but I've heard that before.
Great. Well, let's go a little more macro or global.
Mhm.
What's your favorite brand on the market?
Wow. Um, I really enjoy anything Dean Kamen does, whether, he's the creator of the Segway.
Yep.
And I think that, there's a lot of people who innovate and do amazing things, and, we're not always very accepting of it culturally as a totality. Um, uh, I mentioned Dean Kamen just simply because of his intention, his energy, everything behind what he does. He does it well. It looks great. It's got, it solves a problem. So that feels good to me. As far as mainstream brands, everyone, I'm going to get so many comments and posts on this, but this is just something I wanted to point out as a man is Starbucks. I mean, I'm going to get slashed in the throat for this, but I want to acknowledge the brand simply because I think it's important for every business in this town to take note of this, is that Starbucks is successful because of consistency. And I think every business can really benefit from just that simple observation. I think the brand is very good. I think they're in the integration of the music services and how they're integrating with technology, how they're creating community boards, free internet, all these types of things I think are very beneficial. Obviously, on the flip side of it, the reality of their corporate reality, their footprint, all those types of things, there's a lot to grow, you know. But I would definitely recommend any local business to take note of consistency. It makes the difference. It lets people know what to expect. And when you can expect something on a regular basis, on a daily basis, the quality of a product, the price of a product, the environment, um, you're going to get more return customers.
This is great because I really wanted to wrap up with some applicability of your experience and what you see to what businesses can do locally and how they can think about how they present themselves. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely, absolutely. I think if you wouldn't mind me mentioning just a little something on that is, that when it's a small town, it gets close, and when it gets close, sometimes the service slips a little bit. Sometimes the quality slips a little bit. Sometimes that awareness that even though that's somebody you see every day, that person's bringing in $10 every day. That person's bringing in $30 every other week. And that it's a combination of all those types of local people and familiar faces that makes us survive. So I would just recommend in general, that anytime with business, everyone's important. Every experience is important, and that quality makes all the difference in the world. And I think there's a handful of businesses in this community that really get that, and I think there's a handful of businesses that are well on their way. So I feel good about that.
excellent. Well, Dustin, thank you so much for joining us. And I think people will probably poke you on the shoulder in the post office and at the coffee roasting company saying, "Hey, didn't I see you for the post?"
Slash my throat.
Um, so again, thanks for taking the time, and I hope people have enjoyed this. And if anybody wants to
Absolutely.
nominate somebody else for an interview, just drop me a line and keep an eye on the comments here. Hopefully, we'll get a few of people who like it or don't like it or want to suggest some new things. And Dustin, this was great. I will see you in town.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right.